Okay, now it's recording.
Did you get the date on there?
Now we can say today is
3/3/10.
March 3rd, 2010, and tell us who you are.
We go back when I was born.
Now, what's your name?
David Eugene Benton.
Okay, tell us about where you were born and about your early life a little bit.
Well, I don't remember yes, I remember when I was born. I was born in Payette, Idaho. And when I was born, we had no heat in the house, so they put me in the oven to keep me warm until the doctor got there.
So you were born at home, I take it?
Yes.
What's your date of birth?
So what day were you born?
June the 29th, 1921.
And who were your parents?
Rufus Willis Benton and Vilma Mae Jones.
So you were the first child, right?
That is correct.
What are your first childhood memories?
Being born. Placing me in the oven. Keep me warm.
No, that's not your memory. That's
Oh,
your,
I'm supposed to remember that.
that's your parents' memory.
I don't know. I remember a lot of things.
What, do you remember any? Where were you living then?
When I was born in Payette, Idaho.
Okay. How long did you live there?
I don't know. About a year or so.
So you don't remember anything about that then?
No.
Remember any living in Idaho there when you were a little
Oh,
kid?
yes, I remember. I remember Payette, Idaho. I remember Bernadine Bussey. She was her neighbor. And she had a tricycle. And I used to like to get on the back of a tricycle while she pedaled it. And she could pedal the bicycle and we'd go down to the store for a nickel. We could get an ice cream cone.
And that was in Payette or Cuna?
I think that must have been in Cuna, where Lloyd was born.
Uh-huh. So when did you move there, if you remember?
I don't remember.
You probably wouldn't remember. Do you
Dad moved so many times it's hard to remember.
Tell us what your dad did.
Dad was a railroad telegrapher. Worked for the Oregon Short Line Railroad.
Why did you move so often?
Because that's where his job changed. For the railroad, you bid on a job with your seniority. When a new job came up, anybody that wanted a job put their name in it, and the person that had worked for the railroad the longest period of time got that job. Instead of going through my history, I think it ought to go back to where Mother and Dad met.
Okay, so tell us about that.
My dad, when he was 4 years old, he graduated from the 4th grade. And that's the highest he went in the grade school. And his uncle took a wagon, a team of horses and a wagon and went from Alabama to Texas. Later on, Dad made the same trip to go back there to go to the Tyler Business College in Tyler, Texas, where he learned to be a railroad telegrapher. And after he graduated from there, his first job was with the Oregon Short Line Railroad in Park City, Utah, where he went to train as an assistant station agent. And while he was working there as a station agent, there were some of the young girls in the neighborhood used to come down there and see the young fellows working there. And that's where Dad met Mother, in Park City. Mother's dad was working in Park City in the mines. One of the stories I remember them telling me about him working in the mines with the wagons at Timo. And they would come down one time and got covered in an avalanche. The wagon and the horses all got covered. And they found Grandpa because I guess when he went down he had his hands up in the air and they found that and they got him out, but I think the horses, they said, died from suffocation. And Mother tells the story about when she had a birthday party. I think she was about 8 years old, and the mother had a surprise birthday party and had all the kids come. And they had out in the backyard. They had a root cellar where they dig a hole in the ground, put a roof on it, and keep things cool. And they had all the kids that came to her birthday party. 6 or 8 of them were all down in the can't remember what they call it. Anyway, out in the cellar, and I think they sent her mother sent her out there to get something. That's where the kids had the surprise party on her. Strange thing about that was that when Mother was 82 years old, a couple of years before she died, she could name all of the kids that was to that birthday party after all those years.
What do you remember, what were some of your early memories of things you liked to do?
Well,
that you heard?
before you get that, talking about your mother, how old was she when she moved to Park City? Was her
How old
family?
was she? I don't remember how old she was.
Oh.
Maybe 18 or so. I can't remember how old she was when she got married.
Well, but she grew up, she was born in Creede, Colorado. Do you know how long Grandpa Jones lived there, or how many years he worked there, or anything?
That history's all written down, and mine has got that.
Okay. So go back to your early memories as a child. You remember the tricycle? Do you remember going to school at all in Idaho, or did you start school somewhere else? Or had you already moved again by then?
One story I remember his parents telling about was that he liked wagons. They bought him a little red wagon, and he would go down.
Well,
first
before
of
they
all,
bought me the wagon.
Okay, let him tell the story.
You tell me. I never bought a red wagon. I used to gather up all the kids, neighborhood kids' wagons, until Dad figured that I'd go down the street and the kids had wagons, and I'd pull them out to my place to have them on the front yard. I guess the parents decided they'd better buy me a little red wagon. I remember the first thing, Bernadine Bussey was a little neighbor girl. She was about 6, 7 years old, and she had a bicycle. And I used to like to ride on the back of her bicycle, hold on to her waist, and she could pedal that bicycle. And that's when she used to pedal down to the drugstore about a block away. And
was this a bicycle or a tricycle?
Bicycle. Did I say bicycle?
You said bicycle.
It was a tricycle.
Okay. So where was that? Was that in Idaho?
That was in Kuna.
Kuna, Idaho. And
Kuna,
where?
Idaho, where Royden was born.
What grade schools did you go to, or where do you remember about
First
that?
grade school I went to was in Sandy, Utah. I was in the first grade there. I always tell the interesting story of, I lived about 3 or 4 blocks away from the school, and all the kids there took lunches to school, and I always wanted to take a lunch. And one day, my dad brought me the lunch. Oh, was I ever tickled. It was a paper sack, so he left it there, and I took my paper sack and went out on the bleachers. It was a good day, and all the kids got up there to sit down, and I sat down to eat my lunch, and I opened it up. Guess what was in my sack? My overshoes to come home. I quickly put them on and carried the sack. I don't think I put the overshoes on because I didn't want kids to see my overshoes.
So did you used to go home for lunch?
No. Oh yeah, I did go home for lunch nearly all the time, because it was only a few blocks away.
So what was the address about where you lived? Do you remember about where that was in Sandy?
No, but I could take you to it. It was First Street to the south, and East West Street, First Street to the south of the school, and about 4 blocks away from the school. You go from the school to the first corner, there was an LDS church there, and then you go 3 or 4 blocks to where we lived.
How many years did you live in Sandy?
I was there, I went to school there for 3 years. I was there, first, second, and third grade.
You wouldn't be able to take it that way. I bet that none of those buildings are even there anymore.
Oh yeah, the house is still there. In fact, I think I took Jordan and
I said that when you were describing the school and the church, maybe they are no longer there.
The school, I don't think so, and I don't think the church is either. I remember going to the Mormon church there once on a Sunday, and they passed the sacrament, but I thought that was really unsanitary because the sacrament cup was, they passed it down there, everybody took a sip out of the same cup. I never went back to that church. Oh, I shouldn't tell this one on myself, but on the way, just a few houses away from my house, some people had a hatchery where they hatched eggs for chickens. And one time they reported there was a fire on it, and it was false alarm, and so anyway, we were one of the few people that had a telephone. And I remember one time we go by there and they said, David, go call the fire department. I thought, well, they told me that several times, so I went home and never bothered to call the fire department. But I think it turned out to be a false alarm again, but at that time I think the fire engine did come out there. Another experience I had there was that one year, I was about in possibly the second or the third grade, I got a sled for Christmas. And the city had a pond that they turned the fire hydrant on and filled up this little area that was a pond about the size of your front yard here, maybe say about the size of your backyard. I went down there with my sled, and some of the bigger kids pulled me around there, and then they pulled the dirty trick. They got me going fast and let go of the sled, and it went into the place where the water came out of the fire hydrant, went into the pond because there's no ice there, just water, and I went out right into that cold water, off the ice into the cold water.
So how deep was it?
Oh, about 3 feet deep. I was able to get out of it, but imagine walking about 3 blocks home dragging a sled.
Soaking wet, huh?
Huh?
Soaking wet, huh?
No, it was all frozen until I got home.
Tell them about the
Oh,
time that your dad had told you not to go and sit near a certain, where there was water near your house. A pump.
Oh, well, the first week or so that we moved into the house, we moved into this house, and we had an outdoor toilet out in the back of the yard, but we had running water put into the house, so they had a kitchen sink in there, and right to about 10 feet from the kitchen sink, they dug what we say a cesspool hole about 8-10 feet deep, and it was still open. That just a place for the water to drain out of the kitchen sink. And I was out there one day looking into the pond, you might say, down the bottom of that, and I heard a voice say, David, get away from there. Get away from there. And a couple of times that happened. So anyway, I went in and asked Dad, I don't remember what it was. I thought it was my dad telling me. He said he didn't even know I was out there, but I figured it must have been, well, I think he said it must have been an angel, is what he said, told you to stay away from that. But right after that, he got that covered or somehow so that somebody wouldn't fall in it. Oh, I can tell you
I thought he had told you not to go near it anyway,
Yeah.
previously.
So what home was that?
Where
Where was that home?
That was at the home there in Sandy, Utah. No, I don't think he ever told me not to go near them. We just moved in a few days there.
So you had the outside toilet there. Is that what you always had at that home?
Well, that's all we had there was an outside toilet. And
But you had running water in the house before?
Just in the kitchen sink is only. And for bath, and I tell you, bath, I had the wash tub so big around, and that's why everybody took a bath in.
So how many people were in your home when you were in Sandy?
Well, it was just Lloyd and I, Mom and Dad.
Where were you living when Paul was born?
Lloyd,
I
I guess maybe I don't remember where Paul was born.
And
No,
you,
fourth. I guess this Lloyd and I were the ones there because Paul was born in, so when we moved to Salt Lake, we moved up to 754 Parker's Lane in Salt Lake, just to the east of the Nibley Golf Course.
so, and you had a sister too that was,
Oh, she wasn't born until I was in college.
no, your
And
first
you had
sister
him-
though, your first sister though, the
Oh,
one
the
that,
first is, when we were living in Cuna, or Payette, I can't remember which place, I think it was Payette, my little baby sister, Betty Louise Benton, she only lived about 3 months and she died of a telescoping bowels, they said.
and she was older than Lloyd or younger than
Oh,
Lloyd?
she was
Lloyd.
younger, she was, wait a minute, she was,
She was younger
no,
than
she
Lloyd.
was older than Lloyd.
Uh-huh,
She was older than Lloyd because she died before Lloyd was born.
I see. Okay. And so then,
I remember going to the funeral and I was maybe 4 years old.
uh-huh. The Lloyd was how
Well,
much
Lloyd
younger
was
than
only
you?
2 years younger than you, so he
Yeah.
was born before the baby was born.
Yeah, Lloyd was only 2 years younger than you, so she must have been after Lloyd.
She was born after Lloyd.
Yeah, okay. So, and you said you moved to Salt Lake then?
No, not there. We moved a half a dozen places before.
After Sandy?
Huh?
After Sandy? Was that the next place you moved to, or?
Well, before then, I don't remember. I think we lived at several places up in Idaho along the railroad. Can't remember the name, I think.
Do you remember anything about the houses you lived up there in Idaho?
We lived in the railroad house usually. I remember one thing that when we lived at Orchard, I guess it was, that was another place we lived. The train stopped there to fill up the water tanks, with steam engines, and they'd fill up the water tanks. And when the water tank leaks, there was always a little pond out there. And I remember getting up early in the mornings and watching the wild horses come, Indian ponies coming in. I always wanted to get an Indian pony because I learned to see these horses coming in all the time. I remember that we lived in, I think it was Orchard, I don't remember whether I was sitting there, peanut butter used to come in cans, and I don't know whether we were cleaning out a peanut butter can, eating some peanut butter out of it, and Lloyd came up reaching over, and I think the two of us tumbled down the stairway because there was a basement in there, and I think he got his chin cut off the can, and I remember that when we lived out, I think it was I don't think Orchard, I think it was the name of the town. It was about 20 miles outside of Boise. Grandpa and Grandma Jones had moved to down in South Boise, and I remember the folks who used to go over there to visit Grandma, Mother, and Dad. And one time they went off and forgot me, and they left me there. And I got several miles out home before they noticed that I wasn't in the car. I was a little taught that I was sitting there on the step crying because they'd abandoned me.
So were Grandma and Grandpa Jones still there, or was the whole family
They
gone?
were still there.
They were still there? Okay.
Yeah, they just got off and left me.
So I thought it was at a store, but was it your grandparents' house that they left you?
It was at my grandparents' house. They left me. Then later on, they moved from that place. They moved from that place out on the bench out on Ustick Road.
So that's where Mary lived?
And that's where Mary lived. Mary was younger than Grandma, about 8 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then we used to go, when we were living in Iona, and we used to go over there nearly every summer to visit with Grandpa and Grandma. You know, they just put us on the train and they'd meet us at the train there in Boise, and Boyd and I'd go over there and spend a week or so with them.
Would you go over by yourself?
Oh, Boyd and I'd go together.
How old were you then?
Well, I was in the 7th grade.
And
Boyd was in about the 5th grade.
so I remember going in high school over to see Mary over there in Boise, to their home. Was that the same place, or did they have a different?
Grandpa and Grandma had a place out on Ustick Road, and later on, when Mary got married, they bought the house, or maybe I think they first started renting the house, a lot better house, right to the east of Grandpa and Grandma Jones's home. They had a little piece of land, about 2.5 acres, and they raised a couple of cows there. And
this is Grandma and Grandpa Jones?
Grandpa and Grandma Jones did.
So he'd retired.
They still had an outhouse out there.
He never did work in the mines after they moved to Boise. He didn't have any job.
Do you remember how old he was when he stopped being a miner?
No, I don't, but he died while he was living in that house there. One interesting thing he said, that was before he died, that he said, I don't remember calling it, an angel, call it the prince, referring to Jesus. I think an angel appeared to him and told him he was going to die, and he did.
I thought it was an Indian that, I thought he said it was an Indian that came and told him, was it?
Mary was married in that house, so she married Newell. Oh, I know what it was. Mary's Newell Moore, her husband to be, he became a friend of the family, and he would come out there to visit. His parents come out there and visit with Harry Moore. They'd come out there and visit with Grandpa and Grandma Jones, and when they'd come out there to visit, Aunt Mary didn't want to be around. She'd go out and hide in the corn patch. She ended up marrying him later on. But Newell Moore worked for the lumber company, and he graded lumber. That was his job.
Didn't your Aunt Mary have a job as a secretary or something?
Oh yeah, she had a good job. She went to business college there, and I think she had a job working for some firm down in Boise.
I remember him having the greenhouses there when I was visiting in high school. And
Yeah, that was later.
Was that quite a bit later in their life?
Yeah. They sold flowers all the time. Locally, they sold flowers.
Mary, I don't remember Grandpa and Grandma, but Mary started running a hothouse there for raising flowers. And she had a place out back, a greenhouse there, 30, 40 feet long and 20 feet wide, and they got raising flowers, and they'd raise flowers for weddings and funerals, and got into the business doing that.
She knew how to make corsages.
So you were telling me back that you had moved from Sandy, and then your next school, do you remember, was going there in Salt Lake City. Do you remember how many years you went to school in Salt Lake City?
Yeah, I finished the 3rd grade in Sandy. My dad used to come there. One year he came up there and build a playhouse for the kids in the school there in Sandy. But when we moved up to Salt Lake, we was renting a home. We ended up, Mother and Dad ended up buying a home at 754 Parker's Lane. An unusual situation. They had an artesian well out there. They drilled the well and get water that would just flow naturally out of the ground. It wasn't a very big stream, but I would say it would be equal to a large garden hose running. It didn't come out with that much force. It would just barely come out of the
So did you have indoor plumbing there?
Yeah, we had a nice one there. We had an indoor bath, and we had, I think we had 2 bedrooms upstairs and one in the basement. And that's where Dad's sister Annie and her 2 girls moved out there. I don't know, I think her husband got killed. And she came out there and lived with us for a few months before they found a place else for her to live. And that's where when I was in the 4th grade, I ended up with appendicitis. And that's when the doctors used to make house calls. When they came to the house there and came in and determined I had appendicitis, and they called the ambulance to come get me to take me to the hospital. And I remember they put me on a stretcher and wheeled me from the bedroom. I was out into the living room near the front door. And Brother Lloyd came up to me and he felt so sorry for me. He just looked at me and said, "Oh, David, oh." He said, "I'm sure glad that's you and not me."
Is that where Daniel was born?
Well,
Paul and Daniel?
Well, Paul was born in Salt Lake, but
And Daniel?
Paul was born on the 11th of February, 1928.
Where was he born?
He was born there in Salt Lake.
Was he born at a hospital?
I think so, I don't know.
And so you went for how many years to school there in Salt Lake?
Salt Lake, I went to just the 4th grade. Wait a minute. Yes, again, no, I went to Salt Lake, but I went to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I went 3 years there.
You remember anything about those grades or what you did at school or anything?
We went to the school down on 39th South, and I remember when I was in the 4th grade, I took a Latin, I taught Latin there. I remember learning the roots of the Latin, but one day they had a step about 4 feet high out on the west end of the building, and some larger kid was picking on Brother Lloyd. And he was pretty small, and I was still not too tall, and this kid was a foot taller than me, and so he was picking on Lloyd, and I jumped off the step and threw him to the ground. And when I was picking on Lloyd, and of course they called the principal out there and got called in. Here I was this high, and that kid was this high. They didn't do anything to me. So what the story was. I remember another thing interesting. Austin Carr, there's a little one on post out there north of Idaho Falls on St. Leon Road. They got it up on a post. And when I was in the 4th grade there, I went to the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade there. The kids in school went out there and got the teacher's car and I got around it, and you believe it or not, there were enough kids around that car that we lifted it up off the curb in the parking lot and put it into the parking area between the 2 curbs. Oh, and I also acknowledged there they appointed the kids to be, I don't know what they call them, guards for crossing the streets and all. And I did that one time. Well, that ends. That's where we were living when Dad. Oh, let's go back to Sandy. There was an interesting part of Sandy was that when we were living in Sandy, Dad worked for the railroad. There were 3 tricks, they call them, that worked 24 hours a day around the station there because the trains went through there, passenger trains and freight and luggage. And there was these 3 people. Dad was one of them, and the fellow by the name of Peebles was the other's name, and I can't remember, it'll come to me. But there was a trunk came into the railroad station. It had been there for several months and nobody never came to claim it, and I guess they'd opened the trunk to see if they could find out who had owned it, and they couldn't find any information on that. And Dad went out there one day and opened it up and looked in it, and there was a Book of Mormon. And he borrowed that Book of Mormon and took it home and read it. And then the owner came, finally found out where the trunk was and came and got it, and it was about, people owned it, was about 3-4 miles out of town. And Dad brought the Book of Mormon back to put in the trunk, and it was, the trunk was gone. He asked the people where the other two operators there, where the trunk was. All the people had picked that up, and Dad found out where it was and what their address was. And he walked out there about 3 miles or wherever it was and returned that Book of Mormon. And then it was when the Depression there in 1929, I guess it was, and they were laying off people, and these two operators reported Dad as having stolen some silverware out of there. And they reported it to the railroad. It had been stolen, and that he must have stolen it, and he got fired for stealing that silverware out of the trunk. But they called the woman in to testify that she'd had this silverware stolen. She did not even have any silverware in the trunk. And Dad found out later that she knew that this young fellow that had walked 3 miles to return a Book of Mormon to her, it wasn't the one that stole the silverware out of the trunk. Dad got a job. He was out of work for several months there, and while he was there, he got a job. He'd taken a correspondence course on how to do electrical wiring in houses, and I got out in his 3rd grade, and when we get up in the attics, and I had crawled through the attics, and they used knobs and tubes to run the wires up through the attics to bring them down into the rooms. And so that was the first time that Dad, I guess, started believing in, there was a bunch of Jack Mormons. Some of them weren't very honest.
So he got hired back to the railroad later then?
Dad went to appeal to the superintendent. He was friendly with they used to have a church. He's a guy that come out and check on all the stations, and he went in there and they interviewed him, and he applied for a job, and he got a job in Salt Lake. He got a job in Salt Lake of operating the trains, switching them back and forth, and all they came in there. He was the tower operator, I think they called him. So he had a pretty good job there, and that's when we moved from Sandy up to Salt Lake, so we'd be closer to work.
It sounds like Becca and Katie just got home.
Yeah.
Hey, Katie!
What?
Come here.
Coming.
Wanna go?
Hello.
There's Katie.
Say hi.
Did your sister come to see you at school? Today? No, she stayed out in the car.
Well, they picked me up from golf.
What did you learn today in school?